At a family reunion with 50-plus relatives watching, my dad wrapped an arm around me and introduced me as the mistake we kept, but hey, at least he turned out fine. While everyone gave awkward laughs. I didn't cause a scene. I just calmly walked out, blocked every family member's number, and moved across the country without a word. 2 years later they hired a private investigator to track me down because I vanished without any explanation. They called me a mistake, a mishap. And for years, I believed them. But that one night, everything changed, and I knew I had to disappear, only to return with a vengeance they'd never see coming. I was 26, but this wasn't just a memory, it was a scar. My family dynamic? Picture a sitcom where everyone laughs, except the punchlines are real people, and I was always the target. Caleb, my older brother, was the golden boy. Varsity, dad's company, perfect family. My sister, Chloe, was the free spirit, turned influencer before it was even a thing. And me? I was the oops, the surprise baby, the one they never quite adjusted for. Growing up, I heard whispers. They weren't trying for a third. They almost didn't keep him. It was never said directly to me, until it was. Despite all that, I tried. I was the quiet peacemaker, the one who stayed out of trouble, got decent grades, went to college, never rocked the boat. I thought if I just stayed in my lane, I'd earn a little respect. Maybe even a sliver of pride. But in our house, love was currency, and I was always overdrawn. 6 months before, Mom sent a group email, big family reunion. All caps, of course. Her thing was exclamation points and guilt trips. It talked about a huge cabin in the mountains, everyone together, even Aunt Sarah flying in from Nevada with her dog. At the time, I was living in a one-bedroom in Denver, working as a data analyst. It was stable, quiet. I didn't reply right away. The last family gathering ended with my uncle making an offensive joke about my dating life, and everyone laughed. I didn't, but I still went. Guilt's a powerful thing, especially when you're the one everyone thinks has something to prove. The cabin was massive. 3 stories, wood-paneled, fake bear rugs, the whole rustic fantasy. I pulled up in my used sedan, parking between Caleb's new Escalade and Chloe's leased Tesla. Already, 20 people were inside, more arriving. Hugs, loud voices, the inevitable, "Oh my God, you've gotten so tall," as if I'd grown 3 inches in a decade. I was tired. I'd worked late, caught a 4 a.m. flight with a layover in Minneapolis. Small talk was the last thing I wanted, but I smiled, nodded, played my part. I carried coolers, set up chairs, grilled burgers when the designated master bailed. I even took my little cousins on a hike. I made myself useful. I always did. Saturday night, the reunion hit peak chaos. Dinner was 50-plus people, mismatched tablecloths, mountains of disposable plates, kids with juice boxes, adults getting tipsy on boxed wine. Mom was in her element, wearing a floral apron she didn't need, playing hostess like we were on a low-budget special. She kept announcing, "This is what family looks like, isn't it perfect?" every 15 minutes, like she was trying to convince herself. Then Dad decided it was time for speeches. He'd had a few drinks. His cheeks were red, he swayed slightly. He stood on a wooden bench, clinked his glass. All right, he boomed. "Can I get everyone's attention?" People quieted. Phones came out, cameras pointed. Caleb looked smug. Chloe flipped her hair, struck a pose. I stood off to the side, sipping my soda, thinking maybe it would be one of those harmless dad speeches about memories. You know, the kind that ends with hugs and fake smiles. But no. Instead, Dad looked around, then stretched an arm behind me, pulling me forward like he was about to give me an award. "And this guy," he said with a loud chuckle. "This guy right here." I smiled awkwardly. He kept going. "This one's our family miracle," he announced. Well, more like a mishap that turned out all right in the end. Laughter rippled. Some polite, some not. He grinned. Yep, the mistake we kept. But hey, he didn't end up in jail or anything, so that's a win, right? More laughter. Louder this time. My uncle nearly spit out his drink. My aunt clapped. Even Caleb snorted. Only a few people looked uncomfortable. My cousin just glanced at me, mouthed, "I'm so sorry." But she didn't say it out loud. I didn't laugh. I didn't say anything. I just stepped away slowly, walked back into the house. No one followed. I don't think they even noticed. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of a guest bed, staring at the wall. I could still hear them laughing. I wasn't angry. Not yet. It was something heavier. It felt like being 12 again, overhearing my parents argue about money, and my dad saying, well, if we didn't have to pay for Ethan's stuff. It felt like realizing, again, that I was the footnote in a family that always had a headline. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't pack anything but essentials. I got in my car, turned off my phone, and drove. I didn't even tell my boss I wouldn't be in on Monday. I just left. I crossed 2 state lines before I even looked at a map. I ended up in Seattle, Washington, of all places. I'd never been. I just picked a spot where no one would think to find me. I got a new phone, a new job, a new apartment, no social media. I didn't tell anyone where I went. I didn't answer the emails or texts that came in later, most just saying, "Where'd you go?" as if they didn't know exactly why. For a while, it worked. I built a life out there. Small, quiet, peaceful. I joined a climbing gym, got into photography, made friends who knew nothing about my family or past. I even started dating someone. Really dating. I felt like I was breathing fresh air for the first time in years. Until 2 years later, when I walked out of my apartment and saw a man sitting on the hood of a rented car across the street. Middle-aged, business casual, holding a folder. I didn't know him, but I recognized the look, private investigator. Just like that, the past was clawing its way back. He didn't approach me at first. He just sat there, legs crossed, a leather folder on his lap. His car was unremarkable, a gray sedan. I assumed he was waiting, but then he looked directly at me and gave a nod. Not unfriendly, but not casual. A practice nod that said, "I know who you are." I turned, walked inside, locked the door. I went to the window, peeked through the blinds, and watched him still sitting there. Still watching me. Just like that, my 2 years of peace evaporated. I didn't answer the door when he knocked later. I didn't respond when he slid a manila envelope under the door with a note, "Ethan, your family just wants to talk. Please read." I didn't open it. I threw it in the trash, took the trash out, and walked 3 blocks just to put it in a different dumpster. The next morning, he was gone. But the letter, whatever it was, had done its job. The door was cracked, and memories were pouring in like rain through a broken seal. I started checking my old email account, the one I'd stopped using. Hundreds of messages, mostly unread. I didn't open them. Just seeing the subject lines was enough. "Are you okay? Please come back. Your cousin's wedding is in June. We're worried." But one subject line made me stop scrolling. "Dad had a stroke." I hovered over it. Didn't open it right away, just stared at the preview. "He's okay now, but it was serious. And he keeps asking about you." That night, I didn't sleep. I kept going back and forth. I'd made my escape. I'd rebuilt. But what if? What if I'd gone too far? What if walking away without a word wasn't strength, but cowardice? The next morning, my phone rang. An unknown number. I declined. It rang again 30 seconds later. Same number. I let it go to voicemail. Then a text came through. Ethan, it's Chloe. Please talk to me. I'm not like them. I stood there for 5 minutes staring at the screen. Then I turned my phone off, threw it into a drawer, and went to work like everything was fine. It wasn't. A week passed. Then 2 calls from unknown numbers. I blocked them. Emails started coming to my new accounts: work email, photography portfolio. Somehow, they were finding cracks, slipping through. The private investigator must have found more than just my address. I felt like I was being watched in every room, even when no one was there. I stopped going to the climbing gym, stopped going out at all. The walls of my new life felt thinner by the day. About a month later, Chloe showed up. She was standing outside my building when I left for work, wearing oversized sunglasses, holding a to-go coffee like she was in a paparazzi video. I froze. She smiled. "Hey, stranger," she said softly. I didn't smile back. "How the hell did you find me?" She held up her phone. I didn't. James did. He's persistent. Hired someone. I didn't ask to be found. She nodded. I know, but can we talk? I didn't want to, but I was too stunned to say no. We ended up in a small coffee shop, across from each other in a booth near the window. She looked different, tired, older, not fake happy. "I just wanted to see you," she said. "You didn't even say goodbye." "Didn't think I needed to." "That's not fair." "Neither was calling me a mistake in front of 50 people, I snapped. She looked down. I didn't laugh. "Doesn't matter." There was a long silence. She sipped her coffee. I didn't touch mine. "Dad's sick," she said eventually. "He's not doing great. The stroke hit harder than we thought. He's not himself." I didn't say anything. "He talks about you," she continued. "Keeps asking where you went. Says he didn't mean what he said." I laughed bitterly. "He meant it. He just didn't mean to say it out loud." "Maybe, but Ethan, we're family." I pushed back from the table. "No, we're relatives." "That's not the same thing." She didn't follow me when I walked out. 3 days later, I got a certified letter from my parents' lawyer. It said I was being named in a conditional family trust restructure agreement. I had no idea what that meant, but it mentioned my father's health, his business holdings, and a request for a face-to-face discussion of inheritance restructuring. I ignored it. 2 weeks after that, Caleb showed up. This time, I didn't even let him get a word in. I saw him walking up the stairs to my building, opened my window, and yelled, "Leave now." He looked up, smug as ever. "Come on, man. Don't be a child. You don't get to call me that. I didn't fly across the country to play games. You never flew across the country for me before. Why start now?" He shrugged. "Dad wants to make things right. Tell him he should have done that before he humiliated me." Caleb laughed. "You're seriously still hung up on that, dude? You've always been sensitive." The words hit like a slap. "You've always been sensitive." That was the phrase I'd heard my whole life. Anytime I tried to stand up for myself. Anytime I pushed back, it wasn't that they were cruel. It was that I was too weak to take a joke. I slammed the window shut and walked away. That night, someone broke into my car. Nothing was stolen, but everything had been gone through. Glove box open, trunk emptied, seat pushed all the way back. I filed a report, changed the locks, installed a security camera. I couldn't prove it was them, but I didn't need to. The next letter arrived from my dad. Handwritten, shaky. He apologized, kind of. Said he missed me, didn't want to die with bad blood between us. He wanted me to come home, just for a visit, just to talk. There was a check enclosed, $10,000. I didn't cash it. I didn't even touch it. I stared at it for a while, then ripped it in half. 2 days later, another letter arrived. This one wasn't from Dad. It was from Caleb. And this time, it wasn't sentimental. It was business. If you don't come home soon, he wrote, the company and the estate will pass fully to me. You will be left out of the new documents. We tried to give you a chance. Don't expect another one. I stared at the words for a long time. It wasn't about family anymore. It was about power, control, ownership. And they were dangling it like a bone in front of a dog. But what they didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask, was that I didn't want the money. I never had. What I did want was respect, autonomy, peace. But now they were threatening that, too. And that changed everything, because if they wanted to make this a game, I'd play quietly, strategically, and I'd make sure that when I made my next move, it would be one they'd never forget. I hit my lowest point not long after Caleb's letter. It wasn't just the threat of being cut out or the underhanded way they tried to reel me back in. It was the realization that even after 2 years of silence, 2 years of building something of my own, I was still orbiting their dysfunction like some forgotten satellite, pulled back into their gravity the second they wanted something. And they always wanted something. For a while, I didn't leave my apartment unless I had to. I'd come home from work, heat up something frozen, and stare at the wall like it owed me answers. I ignored texts, letters, even the knock one night that I swear was Chloe again, though I didn't check. I just stood in the hallway, holding my breath, waiting for it to stop. There's a numbness that sets in when you realize your absence only became important to people when it threatened their convenience. When you realize your peace isn't something they care about, it's just something that made you harder to control. I started questioning everything. Why had I left? Why hadn't I burned the bridge publicly? Why hadn't I screamed back at my dad that night instead of slipping away? Part of me felt like a coward. Another part knew that silence had always been my sharpest weapon. But at that moment, sitting on the edge of my bed, surrounded by unopened letters and the ghost of my childhood, I didn't feel powerful. I felt exhausted. Then one night, something cracked. It was raining hard. That cold, sideways Seattle rain that makes your bones ache even through a jacket. I was walking home from the grocery store, hoodie soaked, paper bag handles biting into my fingers, when I saw a little bookstore on the corner. I'd never noticed it before. There was a flickering neon sign that just said open. I ducked inside, mostly to dry off. I didn't plan to stay, but it was warm and quiet and smelled like cedarwood and old pages, the kind of place that doesn't exist in chain stores anymore. Behind the counter sat an older guy with a silver ponytail and half-moon glasses. He didn't say a word, just nodded and kept reading. I wasn't looking for anything, but my eyes landed on a thin paperback tucked between two bigger, shinier titles, The Gift of Being Overlooked. I picked it up, flipped through it. It wasn't a memoir, more like a collection of essays by people who had been written off by family, society, teachers, whoever, and had gone on to quietly build lives that mattered. Not loud success, not fame, just meaning. I bought the book, read the whole thing in 2 days, and something in me shifted. I realized I'd been treating my life in Seattle like it was a pause, like eventually, I'd be forced to hit play again and return to the world I'd left. But what if this wasn't the pause? What if that life, my old one, was the false start? I wasn't a failure. I wasn't broken. I wasn't the mistake they kept. I just hadn't started yet. So, I started. Slowly, quietly, deliberately. I left my analyst job. It was safe, sure, but it was draining the life out of me. I'd been building up savings, living frugally, freelancing on the side, taking on odd photography gigs. I'd never needed much. I started working full-time as a freelance photographer. Weddings, local events, portraits, real estate. I didn't have the best gear, but I had an eye, and I cared. Word of mouth spreads fast when you show up on time and treat people like humans. I joined a local co-working space. Small, a few desks, beat-up couches, a weirdly aggressive espresso machine. But it was filled with people building things, startups, art, nonprofits. For the first time, I felt like part of a community where no one cared who your parents were or what your last name meant. That's also where I met Mara. She was a UX designer, always wearing mismatched socks and drinking horrifying green juice. We were desk neighbors. She made me laugh. I made her playlists. One night, we stayed late, and she looked up from her laptop and said, "You ever think you're here for a reason?" I blinked. Like, in Seattle? No, I mean, here. Alive. Doing what you're doing. Sometimes, I said. Mostly, I just feel lucky to be out of the wrong place. She smiled. That counts. We started dating not long after, and it was different. She didn't try to fix me, didn't pry. She just saw me. And for someone like me, who'd grown up feeling like wallpaper, that was a bigger deal than I could explain. Around that time, I got serious about my own project. It started as a blog, a place to put my thoughts. I called it Second Draft. Stories, reflections, photos from my shoots, pieces of myself I'd always kept hidden because I didn't think they mattered. But they did. People started reading, subscribing, sharing. One post, in particular, went mini-viral. It was titled, "When You Realize You Were the Family Scapegoat." I didn't name names. I didn't even say it was my story, but it struck a nerve. Hundreds of comments, emails from strangers saying, I thought I was the only one. That's when I realized my story wasn't unique. It was just unspoken. And speaking it out loud? That was power. I bought better gear, took online business classes, upgraded my website, started taking on clients who aligned with my values, nonprofits, activist groups, small businesses trying to do something meaningful. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't struggling. I had purpose. I had roots. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had anything to prove to anyone. Which is why, when the final letter came, I didn't cry. I didn't freeze. I didn't even get angry. I just read it. This one was from my mom. Short, handwritten, shaky, but legible. Your father is dying. Please come home. That was it. No guilt, no lecture, no check. Just those 6 words. I sat with the letter for a long time. Read it again, then again, and I realized something. They weren't reaching out to fix what they broke. They were reaching out because they feared being forgotten. And I had already forgotten them. But this time, I wouldn't just disappear. This time, I wouldn't run. This time, I'd show up. Not because they wanted me to, but because I had something they didn't expect. Power. I didn't decide to go back right away. The letter sat on my desk for a full week, unopened after that first reading. Every time I walked past it, I caught myself glancing at the crease, the slanted handwriting, the way she didn't even sign it love, Mom. Just please come home. Home. That word had never felt less accurate. Still, I knew I'd go. Not because I wanted to make peace. Not because I forgave them. But because I needed to see it. I needed to know how much had really changed. If they were still clinging to the narrative that I was the problem. If they still thought they could rope me back into the orbit of their broken little galaxy. And if I was being honest, part of me wanted to look them in the eyes and let them see what they'd thrown away. But I wouldn't go unprepared. If this was the end game, I was going to play it like chess. Quiet, deliberate, 3 moves ahead. They didn't know what I'd built in those 2 years. They didn't know I wasn't scared of them anymore. And most importantly, they didn't know I had something they never expected. Leverage. It started with the business. My father's company, Sterling Dynamics, was a mid-sized manufacturing firm based in Indiana. Family-owned. My grandfather started it after World War II. My dad expanded it, and Caleb was set to inherit it. I'd never shown any interest growing up, which suited them fine. I was the artsy one, the dreamer, the one who took pictures instead of learning quarterly reports. But I had paid attention, quietly. Over the years, I'd absorbed more than they realized. And when I got that last letter, I decided to dig. First stop was the Public Business Registry. Took me less than 10 minutes to find the company's filings, corporate structure, and board information. Sterling Dynamics was still privately held, but they'd taken on some investors in the last decade. Minority stakeholders listed in dry legalese. I cross-referenced a few names. One stood out, a holding company based in Denver. I knew the name. I'd done freelance work for a startup they'd acquired. That was my opening. I made a call, reached out to an old contact, Sarah, a former project manager who now worked at the holding company's venture arm. We hadn't talked in a year, but she remembered me. Ethan. Oh my God, I still use your headshot from that event you did. What's up? We talked, caught up. I asked if she knew anything about Sterling Dynamics. She paused. Is that your family's company? Long story, I said. Let's just say I might be involved soon, and I want to know what I'm walking into. She laughed. Smart. Honestly, we've been a little concerned. They've missed 2 deliverables this quarter. Supply chain's been shaky since your dad got sick. That got my attention. She kept going. We don't own enough to make big waves, but if you're about to take some kind of leadership role, let's just say we'd be happy to have a voice on the inside. That confirmed it. They were vulnerable. My father was clearly declining. Caleb, despite his arrogance, was likely fumbling. And the board, probably handpicked by my dad, was likely split between loyalty and uncertainty. It was a house of cards, and I was going to blow. But first, I needed to get closer, on my terms. So, I wrote back a letter, handwritten, simple. I'll come. I'll visit. But I need full transparency. I want to see the will, the trust, the business records. If you truly want me involved, then treat me like someone who matters. Otherwise, I won't step foot in that house again. I mailed it and waited. 3 days later, Caleb called. I didn't answer. He called again, left a voicemail. You're being dramatic. Just come home. Dad's dying. I deleted it. A day later, I got an email from their lawyer. The tone was different. Dear Ethan, I've been instructed to provide you with full access to the Sterling Dynamics documents per your request. Please find attached. It was all there. PDF after PDF, financial reports, shareholder breakdowns, executive roles. And buried within it, a clause in the trust that hadn't been updated since I was a teenager. I was still technically listed as a contingent beneficiary. Not primary, but not zero. Meaning I had legal standing. I forwarded the documents to a lawyer I'd met through one of my photography clients, a corporate attorney who moonlighted helping small creators. I asked for a deep read. She got back to me the next day. You've got more power than you think, she said. They can't just write you out unless they prove you're unreachable or have formally declined, and they haven't done either. If you want to contest any restructuring, you've got ground to stand on. I smiled for the first time in days. Then I started assembling my toolkit. I reached out to Mara, told her everything. She didn't blink, just said, so, what's the play? I need to go back, I said. But I need to look like I'm surrendering. She raised an eyebrow. Ethan, you don't do surrender. Exactly. That's why it'll work. The next few weeks were a blur. I updated my portfolio, built a case study on my most successful client projects, created a private landing page labeled Sterling Media Proposal, a full pitch deck showing how I could help modernize the branding and outreach of the company using my skills. It wasn't just pretty pictures. It was strategy, analytics, growth projections, social impact campaigns, ESG alignment. I knew Caleb would scoff. I wanted him to, because while he was busy dismissing me, I'd be planting seeds. I flew out mid-September, told no one but Mara and my lawyer. When I landed, I rented a car and drove straight to the hospital. My dad was awake, hooked up to machines, thinner than I remembered. His skin looked gray, but his eyes lit up when I walked in. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. "It's okay," I said, sitting beside the bed. "Don't talk." He grabbed my hand, squeezed weakly. We didn't say much. Just sat there, and for a moment, I let myself feel it. The grief, the anger, the leftover love I didn't know was still there. But I didn't stay long. I left him a note before I walked out, "We'll talk soon, but not here." Next, I went to the house. Caleb opened the door, smirked like I was a stray dog that finally limped home. "Took you long enough," he said. I didn't flinch. I had things to do. He stepped aside. "Mom's in the sunroom. You remember where that is, right?" I did. Of course, I did. I remembered everything. I walked through the house like it was a museum of past humiliation. The staircase where I once tripped and got mocked. The dining table where my dad laughed about my art elective. The hallway where my mom said, "I just wish you were more like your brother." It all came flooding back. But I wasn't that kid anymore, and they didn't know who they were dealing with. I spent the next 3 days observing, listening, watching. Caleb clearly thought he was in charge. He barked at staff, talked over the lawyer, treated Mom like a fragile PR problem. But I saw the cracks. The accountant flinching when Caleb asked about reallocating funds. The board's emails peppered with passive-aggressive uncertainty. They didn't trust him. They were looking for someone else. I gave them a candidate. Me. Quietly. Subtly. Over dinners, I asked questions, took notes, pointed out holes in the marketing strategy, showed them how competitors were outpacing them digitally. I didn't criticize. I offered solutions. Helpful, humble, unthreatening, until I wasn't. At the end of the week, I requested a meeting, not with my family, but with the board. I presented my proposal, not as a hostile takeover, but as an invitation. I showed them how I could create a new division, Sterling Media, that would bring in new revenue, revitalize the brand, and position the company for the future. I showed them my numbers, my growth projections, my case studies. I showed them me. And they listened. Even the ones who remembered me as the mistake. Because in business, results speak louder than blood. After the meeting, one board member pulled me aside. "Ethan," he said, "I don't know what happened between you and your family, but I'll tell you this. What you just presented? It's exactly what this company needs." I nodded. That's all I ever wanted. To be needed. He smiled. "I think you just changed everything." And I had. But it wasn't over yet, because now that I had a foot in the door, it was time to kick it open. I didn't swing the hammer all at once. That would have been too easy, too obvious. No, I did it slowly, carefully, like someone unpicking a knot tangled for years. The first thread I pulled was the most delicate, the one holding my father's company together. After the board meeting, I got provisional approval to begin groundwork on Sterling Media, a digital modernization division. It started as a pet project, something they could test with minimal risk. But in reality, it was my Trojan horse, a sanctioned role, an official title, a seat at the table. And that was all I needed. Caleb didn't like it, not one bit. He tried to play it cool. Happy to have you on board, little bro. But the way he gripped the arms of his chair during meetings said everything. He didn't expect me to stay. He thought I'd drop in, make peace with Dad, maybe collect a check, and go back to Seattle. He didn't realize I was building something real. I worked 12-hour days. Hired a skeleton crew of freelancers I trusted. Designed a rebranding campaign. Ran analytics. Optimized logistics on the back end. Meanwhile, I met with vendors, legacy clients, even skeptical board members who thought I was just another soft creative. I spoke their language, numbers, ROI, retention. I showed them results. The board began to shift. And Caleb? He began to unravel. The more I succeeded, the more obvious his failures became. He'd been coasting for years on the assumption that he was the heir apparent, but he didn't understand the modern business landscape. He didn't adapt, didn't innovate. Worst of all, he micromanaged, pushing loyal employees to the brink, firing anyone who pushed back, cementing his authority with yes men while the company bled slowly from the inside. I didn't need to sabotage him. He was doing that all by himself. All I did was document it. Every complaint, every missed metric, every private contractor whose payments were delayed or mismanaged under his leadership. I gathered it quietly, professionally. I wasn't just taking notes, I was building a dossier. And when the time came, I'd show it to the exact people who needed to see it. But first, I had to make things right with the one person I hadn't confronted directly, my father. He was back home by then, recovering in a private wing of the house. We hadn't spoken much, and for the first few weeks, he mostly slept. But one morning, I found him awake, staring out the window at the backyard like he didn't recognize it. I sat beside him. He didn't look at me right away. "Heard you're turning the company into a media circus," he said flatly. I smiled. "Just trying to make it profitable." He exhaled through his nose. Half a laugh, half a sigh. "Never thought you'd come back." "I didn't come back," I said. I moved forward. He nodded slowly. "Your mother says you're doing good work." I waited, then said, "She also told me what you said at the reunion." He winced. "It was a joke," he said. "A bad one." "No," I said. "It was the truth. Just not the kind you meant to say out loud." He didn't reply. I leaned in. "You wanted to humiliate me. To remind everyone where I stand." He didn't deny it. I stood to leave. But before I walked out, I said, "You don't have to like me. You don't have to love me. But if you want the company to survive, you'll need me." He closed his eyes, and I walked out. That night, Caleb cornered me in the garage, red-faced, sweating. "You think you're clever?" he hissed. Sliding into meetings, kissing up to the board, playing the underdog card. "They're just humoring you. You're still the screw-up. You always will be." I looked him dead in the eye. "No, Caleb. I was the backup plan, and now I'm the exit strategy." He stormed off. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Sarah, the contact at the holding company. She was blunt. "We're voting at the next board meeting. We're backing your proposal." "What proposal?" I asked, playing dumb. She chuckled. "Don't play coy. Your plan to restructure the executive branch, phase out legacy leadership, consolidate operations." I let out a slow breath. It passed committee with flying colors. "Your numbers are airtight, and frankly, no one trusts your brother anymore." It was time. The final board meeting was a closed session. All executives, no assistants, no distractions. I came prepared. Slide deck, financials, performance data, testimonial letters from longtime vendors who supported my plan. Then, quietly, methodically, I presented the dossier. I didn't embellish. I didn't gloat. I just laid out the facts. The contracts Caleb had mishandled. The employees he'd fired without cause. The suppliers he shorted. The clients he lost. The morale he tanked. And then I ended with this: Sterling Dynamics has survived 3 generations not because of bloodlines, but because of leadership. We can't afford entitlement. We need stewardship, accountability, vision. I clicked the final slide. It read, Proposal: Install Ethan as Acting Executive Director of Sterling Media and Strategic Operations. Immediate effect. Silence. Then a board member cleared her throat. I second the motion. Another voice. All in favor. Hands went up. Unanimous. Caleb looked like someone had slapped him with a brick. He stood up, ready to scream, but Dad, frail, quiet Dad, spoke from the end of the table. Sit down, Caleb. And he did. He actually sat. Later in the hallway, Caleb tried to corner me again, but this time there was no venom, just disbelief. You can't just take this. I shrugged. I didn't take it. I earned it. He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. After all, I wasn't the mistake anymore. I was the reckoning. Over the next 6 months, I turned the company around. Revenue increased. Public image improved. Internal culture shifted. I promoted people who had been overlooked for years. I created new internships. I built partnerships with nonprofits. We even launched a scholarship in my grandfather's name. My dad retired officially. He didn't say much, but one day he handed me an envelope with a photo inside. Me at 5 years old, covered in finger paint, grinning like a maniac. He said, I didn't know what to do with you back then. I know, I said. But I figured it out myself. He nodded. You did. My mom cried when I told her I was staying in town for now, not because I felt obligated, but because I had earned my place on my terms. And Chloe? She apologized. Truly. We met for coffee and had the most honest conversation of our lives. She admitted she'd been scared of being on the outside, too. That maybe that's why she stayed silent all those years. I forgave her, not because she asked me to, but because I was ready. And Caleb? He left the company quietly, shamefully. He still shows up to family events, still tries to act like the center of attention. But now, the room doesn't revolve around him. No one laughs at his jokes the same way. And me? I don't shrink in his presence anymore. I exist fully, authentically, unapologetically. It's funny, all they wanted was for me to come home. But I realized I'd already built a home, a life, and a future where I truly belonged. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is walk away, then walk back in as someone entirely new. What would you have done if your family had labeled you as their biggest mistake?